Wait, didn't I play this game already? Hey, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon, and today I'm reviewing Ys X Proud Nordics. Thanks to NIS America for providing the code. I'm going to get the obvious stuff out of the way right up top. This is a re-release of Ys X Nordics, a game that came out like a year and a half ago in the West. It has some new content, nothing essential or mind-blowing, but good, high-quality DLC type stuff. New side quests, new abilities. It expands on what was an already fantastic action RPG. I do think the keyword, though, is DLC. It really does feel like DLC that's been packaged into a brand new full release. That's not inherently a bad thing, of course. Games do that sometimes. The Persona series comes to mind, right? Persona 5, Persona 5 Royal. It does seem a little fast, at least to us in the West, though keep in mind, Ys X was out for a year in Japan before it hit our shores. But does it add enough newness to justify the asking price for fans who've already picked up the original? Let's talk about it. If you want to know the nitty-gritty about the base game, hey, I did a review of that one back when it came out. I'll link it in the description. Ys X is a fantastic game, and one of the best things I can say about this is that I had significantly more fun playing it this time than I did even that first time, and I loved it the first time too. I got way more into the side quests and optional content because I was much more comfortable with the gameplay. The story has become my favorite in the Ys series, which is kind of surprising to me, actually. I think revisiting it now has fully cemented it as the best in my mind. There are so many likable characters, and Karja, the girl that Adol finds himself magically shackled to the entire game, is by far the best partner Adol's ever had. Sorry, Dogi, I like the way you break walls, and you're a really great community manager, but Karja is the coolest. Like I said in my original review, this one took me a bit of time to get used to initially because it's a much more blocking-focused action RPG than I'm used to. I like to dodge, and while you can certainly dodge in this game, blocking is much more useful. But again, this is not a review of Ys X Nordics. That game already exists, and that review is just waiting for you. Like I said, down in the description. So let's talk about why you're most likely really here. Ys X Proud Nordics is an opportunity for Falcom to not just add new content to Ys X, but also to correct some of the small issues that bugged me in the original. And they definitely did make improvements to the core of the game. One of the biggest and most welcome improvements is the addition of new sea battles that permanently improve traversal. In the original game, your ship sailed so slowly. There were certain areas with wind currents that would let you speed along at a good pace, but those were few and far between. In Proud Nordics, there are special sea battles that once you beat them, unlock new wind currents. There are a lot of them too, and challenging all of them makes the ocean map so much more enjoyable to explore. Like, I actually explored this time, since I was never irritated by how slow I was going. A very, very smart addition that significantly fixes a really bad irritation. But one problem I have is, since it has been a year and a half since I played the original, I can't always recall if something is a brand new feature or something I either overlooked in the original or have just forgotten about, you know? In general, like I said before, I had way more fun playing it this time around, and I think you can chalk that up to the various improvements they made, and also just me being more comfortable with the gameplay. There are a small handful of issues I had with the original release that are unfortunately still present here. They don't really impact the gameplay, more the presentation, but still I kind of hoped that they'd get fixed. Specifically, there's an issue with a lot of the environmental dialogue. These are the little bits of conversation that'll play when you're running around in an area. The audio clips play back to back way too quickly, and it loses the conversational feel that most Falcom games have. It sort of shatters the illusion, if you know what I mean. Not a huge deal, but should have been a slam dunk to fix that here. Also, ship conversations. As you're sailing around, you'll see notifications in the upper left corner letting you know there are ship conversations you can listen to. These are just fun, interesting little discussions among the crew. The problem before, and the problem that remains now, is that you almost never get to fully hear one of these things play out unless you sit perfectly still until it finishes. The sea is so sectioned off by checkpoints that sailing even a short ways forward will almost inevitably lead to the ship conversation getting cut off. You can go back and listen to them via the menu, but I don't want to do that. I just want to hear them while I'm sailing around. So I actually just completely gave up this time and didn't bother listening to any of them. It's a real bummer because they're entertaining, but they just don't fit into the game well. But those were minor gripes to begin with, and they may not bother you at all, so take those with a grain of salt. The meat of this video should be dedicated to the completely new content, so let's get into that. There are a couple of major new things to do in this version of the game. The first and biggest is Oland Island, a landmass in the northwest of the map that's the biggest island in the entire game. Here, starting around Chapter 5, you'll be able to periodically return to tackle new challenges brought to you by a couple of new characters, Karja's cousin Canute and his shield sister Astrid. Don't mind me, I've just watched The Office way too many times. As Adol and Karja gain new abilities, new parts of Oland Island become accessible, which basically means new beefy dungeons to explore. It's a great place to gain experience and find a bunch of helpful loot, and the parallel story that it tells to the main plot of the game was actually surprisingly pretty cool. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Other Ys fans, you'll have to let me know if you think I'm crazy, but I feel like the end of this new content sort of alludes to Adol's future exploration of the North, which series diehards will know is the place Adol disappears years down the road. I honestly hope Karja plays a role in some future Ys game, at least. The series has been stingy with bringing back characters, aside from Dogi, obviously, but she's such a cool character. It'd be a shame if this was the last we saw of her. The downside to the way this new story is told is that because it's essentially a new short story told within the confines of the greater Ys X story, we can't really get any substantial character development for Karja. In order for this to slot in nicely without disrupting the rest of the story, she can't really grow from any of the events that happened on Oland Island. She has to still end up at the same place. Maybe it could have worked better if this new content wasn't optional, if it had been more fully baked into the main story. That would have required a lot more work, naturally, and I get why Falcom wouldn't want to do that, but I feel like making that effort would go a long way toward making this feel like more than DLC. So, Canute and Astrid are fun characters, but they're not really woven into the fabric of the rest of the game. I mean, they sort of drop Astrid into the background at the beginning, but that doesn't really count. The Oland Island adventure is as separate as a quest can be and still be within the boundaries of the main game. The new area doesn't just have a bunch of new dungeons and enemies to fight though, it also gives you a new ability. It's called Mana Grab, and the idea is that you can grab certain blocks and projectiles and throw them around. Grabbing and throwing blocks will help you solve traversal puzzles on Oland Island, though again, since this is optional content, none of those sorts of puzzles show up on the critical path. You also have a few opportunities to chuck projectiles back at enemies, and that is something you're able to do outside of the new content, though I will admit, the mechanics around Mana Grab don't work very well for me. Throwing objects happens on an arc, and the way the game shows you the trajectory of your throw just isn't very clear to me at all. It's a real UI failure in my opinion. Also, I have to say, and I played this on Steam, so I can't say whether this is the case everywhere or not, but Mana Grab is pretty buggy. Like throwing a block at the wall almost never causes the block to bounce off the wall like you would expect. Instead, it gets sort of stuck in the wall and kind of begins rotating around in like a strange way. It still lets the block work as a platform, but it's obviously not what the devs intended to happen. There was a patch that was released during the review period, and I can't say for sure, but I think maybe it helped improve that issue a bit, but it definitely didn't fix it 100%. I know there's a day one patch for consoles at least, so hopefully that's addressed for those players by that fix. But it was kind of a bummer. It just, I don't know, didn't feel like Falcom. Their games tend to have a level of polish that this new mechanic just doesn't. It definitely pales in comparison to the rest of the game mechanics in the main Ys X. It bums me out because Mana Grab actually looks really cool and feels like it has the potential to open up new secrets in the main game. I mean, yeah, that means they would have to put them in there since the mechanic didn't exist in the original game, but how cool would that have been to get some nice but non-essential stuff using this new mechanic throughout the rest of the game? Anyway, Oland Island by itself is a really beefy chunk of new gameplay. Then there's also the post-game dungeon Muspelheim. I think I'm saying that right. Muspelheim. I don't know. This is a timed dungeon where you're trying to get through a whole bunch of enemies and obstacles to reach the depths. You can challenge it multiple times, and collecting items and killing bad guys will give you currency that you can spend to modify the dungeon by increasing the amount of time you have or the number of chests you'll run into. Also, collecting items and killing enemies on your run adds time back to the timer, so it's important to not just blindly rush through. It's a neat concept, and I was enjoying it up until I realized I'd inadvertently finished it. I expected this would take me hours to conquer, but no, it was like 45 minutes. Does that mean I'm some kind of a pro gamer? Yes. So don't feel bad if it takes you longer. I'm just made of sterner stuff than most. And don't be jealous. I had to give up a lot of life's joys to get this good. I've never walked on a beach at sunset, or stargazed on a mountaintop, or shopped a BOGO sale at Payless Shoe Source. I spent my life training. But seriously, I was a bit let down by Muspelheim. Like I said, it's a cool concept, and I liked it as I was tackling it. I just expected it to be much longer than it ended up being. It also sort of teases you with a mystery, which unfortunately doesn't turn out to be all that exciting in the end. Just temper your expectations and you'll have a good time with it. That's kind of the lesson from this whole experience. Know what it is, and you will have fun with it. It's a great game made better with new stuff to do. But is it worth it? Is Ys X Proud Nordics worth it is a hard question to answer. It's also one I don't really typically try to answer on my channel. I don't see my job as being to tell you whether a game is worth spending your money on. That's not how I understand criticism to work. I analyze a game and tell you how it affects me, and I trust you to take that information and apply it to your own life. You're different than me, your experiences will be different. But this game is a bit of a different thing than most I review. The new content really does feel like DLC. Like good DLC. DLC that I'd probably be willing to pay $20, $25 for. Beefy DLC. But DLC, all the same. It apparently stems from this being initially developed for Switch 2, and because the original Switch couldn't handle the new content, they didn't structure it in such a way that it could be separated out as DLC. So with that in mind, and considering how different this is than other games I've reviewed, I feel like I should at least weigh in on whether I think this is worth it for people who are fans of the original game. It's not $70 worth of new content, but it does cost $70 to experience it. If you loved Ys X and you want more of it and you can afford to double dip, then absolutely. I think the new stuff is a blast to play, and the Olan Island quests in particular have some really excellent content. There's races, a coliseum, it's packed with extra stuff to do. If you liked Ys X but aren't looking to revisit it anytime soon, you can probably sit this one out. Maybe there's some slim chance this stuff will show up as DLC for the PC and PS5 versions of the game down the line. Maybe? I don't know. But if you haven't played Ys X at all, this is absolutely the version to buy. It's everything all in one package, and if you didn't know the story behind the game's development, you might not even realize there was new stuff being added. The new content is definitely worth playing, absolutely. But how much it's worth is going to depend on all those factors I mentioned, and probably more I didn't think of. Ys X is a really special game. You can play it in multiple ways, which is something I didn't even really realize the first time. My original playthrough, I mostly had Adol and Karja hunker down together using their team-up abilities almost exclusively. This time I branched out and focused a lot more on individual special moves, and it feels like an entirely different play experience. And Adol and Karja both play a bit differently too, so you can spend even more time mastering them both if you want to extend your playtime even more. The story is really compelling, even if, and just an aside here, even if the end sort of pulls what I would consider to be a really dumb and contrived stunt at the last minute to manufacture an emotional payoff that could have been handled better another way. If you've played the original, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's the final boss battle. Like, it's fine, but I wouldn't have objected if they'd taken another pass at the reasoning for that sequence of events to make it make a bit more sense. But quibbles aside, the story, the characters, the action, everything is charming and downright cool. There are so many boss battles where a timed block leads to a cool as heck bespoke animated sequence that plays out that just makes the whole thing feel so cinematic. Seriously, I could gush about Ys X for hours. But like I said, this is a complicated release, a complex situation that I don't think you can answer with a simple yes or no as to whether it's worth it. I hope this sort of thing doesn't become the norm for Falcom, I'll say that much, just because I would much rather see DLC additions to future titles to keep new content equally accessible to everyone. and not just latecomers and those that are willing to double dip on their purchases. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Ys X Proud Nordics. Let me know in the comments if you're planning to pick it up, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.